As someone who comes from a part of County Wexford, a mile from Duncannon, where fishing is a way of life for many, and in the past, I am concerned very much for the community, and I want to thank and I want to support the Rural Independent Group on their motion today. And I just want to talk about some of the points that are highlighted in the motion, Chair. Firstly, it says all fishers, including the inshore fishermen, have been hit extremely hard by record high fuel cost increases, while bait prices have also soared, which are mainly due to almost all bait now being imported, as the larger white fish vessels have taken advantage of the tie-up scheme. And we all know that the fuel costs has burdened so many different sectors in our society, but those in the fishing fleet are wholly reliant on going out to fish to make ends meet, and the alternative to this is to cease operating, which unfortunately, Chair, many are choosing to do. And those who rely on going to fish cannot avoid the fuel crisis by working from home, nor by switching to public transport, or just by buying a new electric vessel. And the choices which might be available to onshore workers to avoid the extra costs simply are not there for the fishing communities. This is why tax breaks or supports to a slightly larger degree than other sectors would be appropriate. The motion also highlights that small fishermen are facing annihilation, a problem which was exacerbated by the current government, which has decided the simplest solution to deal with the loss of the Irish fishing quota is to decommission the white fish fleet. This scenario sums up the government's approach to the fishing sector. Not just this government's approach, mind you, but previous governments also. And the political will just isn't there to stick up for the interests of Irish fishers when it comes to negotiations. The fallback solution appears to be, let's pay off the fishermen. Now, I'm pleased that the motion highlights the realities of many of the deals that the Irish government have agreed to at EU level. And there's no doubt that that our membership of the EU brings many benefits to sectors of the Irish economy. But it seems that at least the one exception to this is the fishing community. And the motion highlights some of the reality when it says Irish boat owners are forced to sit in the harbour and watch as their EU neighbours from France and Spain land fish from Irish waters in the Irish harbours, while benefiting from a fuel subsidy implemented by their governments on the back of a derogation given by the European Commission. Now, can you imagine just how soul-destroying this must be for Irish boat owners and fishers, struggling on the margins or towing the line between staying afloat or going out of business, to see this type of thing happening and being allowed to happen and continues to happen. With those things in mind, Chair, the motion calls for increased government supports for the inshore fishing sector, and that such a support scheme would be processed speedily and conveniently to increase quotas. I agree with the proposers of this motion in their calls for action, and I hope that the Minister is listening, that the government will put a plan in place to support those in the inshore fishing. But I want to read an email I received in January, and Minister, it's just on foot of some of the commentary that you had in your speech. And I think, I stood on the pier in Kilmore Quay with you, and your visit was very much appreciated. But I think, if you recall, the anger was palpable from a community in Kilmore who the entire community depends on fishing. They have a processing plant. All of our restaurants and hotels in Kilmore have their reputation because of fresh fish caught by their fishermen, their own local fishermen. And this is something I received on the 9th of January from one fisherman in Kilmore. And it says, the decommissioning scheme has been in the news lately, and we would like to give our views. A figure is calculated for compensation based on tonnage of the boat, the amount of fish caught and the age of the boat. This presumably is to compensate fishermen for the loss of his income or their income and way of life forever. This should not be confused with the temporary tie-up scheme, which has run for the last 2 years as compensation for our reduced quotas due to Brexit. The decommissioning and temporary tie-up are separate schemes, and the tie-up money should not be deducted from the decommissioning money. The decommissioning scheme is a disaster for coastal communities. It is a cop-out by the government, who have failed miserably to get a fair share for our fishers, even in our own waters. Since 1983, we have 2.9% of that quota for sole in area F and G. And in brackets he says, the south coast of Ireland to Land's End is which that area covers. Belgium has 63%. A disparity there, Minister, of over 60% to the advantage of Belgium. Ireland has 7% of the monkfish, while France has 57%, and Belgium again are up on Ireland at 8%. If we had a fair share of the quotas, there would be no need for a decommissioning scheme, and the state would save some €60 million. If there is a big take-up, the industry will get very small and will not be able to sustain many of the backup industries, such as processing, engineering, transport. And I think, Minister, we can bring tourism, and serious tourism, particularly in coastal areas. The value of the restaurants having fresh fish every day is particularly what enhances people and brings them into the community. But a much better scheme, he continues, would be to continue the temporary tie-up for 1 month every year. And I think we've got, in line of what we've been discussing, again, it's your department, albeit a different junior minister, Cuilta and decommissioning. We're selling off the family silver. At least that's what it looks like, Minister, in rural Ireland. And I know you're from a coastal community. But why would we be selling, why would Cuilta be selling our lands? And something that was brought to my attention this morning, and I think it's very relevant, because this is about rural Ireland, and it's also about rural communities. But you have the power as Minister to change the forest premium, because it hasn't been sanctioned by the EU. There would be 100 million in forest premiums leaving the country annually. And Minister, I'm told that you can reduce this to the investors that Cuilta seem to have a done deal with. But what is being suggested, and I very much back the suggestion, is that you would reduce the premium to the investors and increase it to the farmers, which would incentivise farm forestry. And at the very least, we would retain ownership of our lands. And I think decommissioning is the same thing. We are selling the family silver. Rural Ireland, I think, you know, when Leo Varadkar, our Taoiseach, appointed a third minister in a Dublin central constituency, it was a rejection of rural Ireland and the calls that we put on the floor like this. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.